God. Look out. Oh, no! Good God Almighty! Good God Almighty! That killed him! Oh, my God. As God is my witness, he is broken in half!
Hey guys, WaifuGate here again. Today we'll be doing another deck guide. This time, it's over a deck that we've covered for in the past, which is Yorion, like Azorius Yorion. But I made some tweaks to the deck, both to the main deck and the sideboard, and I think this is pretty well positioned in the meta at the moment, if you don't mind a slightly slower paced deck. It's not going to win you games fast like Jeskai Yorion, where like, you know, you just windmill slam the Luca and then just sort of try to get there with like cheesing out the agent and such. This deck, however, isn't as vulnerable to like counter spells. I would say that we struggle against most decks that run something like, you know, Teferi 3 and they resolve it real easy. That being said, we do have 2 Tails Ends, 3 Vetoes, 4 Neutralize. We might be able to stop the Teferi game 1, and if not, we have 6 copies of ECD between this and Mythos, so if the opponent deploys an ECD, we can sometimes copy it, either answering their ECD, answering their Teferi, so it's exiled and they get nothing back off of ECD potentially. You know, there are a lot of really neat plays, and before I wasn't running this in my other U-White. The other differences are, I think I'm not running any Essence Scatters here, I'm teching in Vetoes instead. And my sideboard's different. I think that we are more vulnerable to something like Jund Sack, where we don't have Knight of Autumns in the sideboard like a Bant Yorion would, or like any Heliod's. If you're really struggling against something like Jund Sack, like if that's becoming more of a thing on the ladder, you could make some trims, like maybe trim a Mystical Dispute, maybe cut the Narsets altogether. Because she hasn't been super great. Like, she's really good against cycling, and that's about it. The other decks aren't really hurt by her as much. Sometimes Tamir Elementals, this thing can do pretty well, but you already have good sideboards with Hushbringers for Tamir Elementals. So I'd just say, like, trim some numbers to find room for, like, Heliod, so you can 2-for-1 them on, like, you know, Oven Heliod, or not Oven Heliod, Oven Trail of Crumbs. That's the other big one for Jund, because like we can kind of deal with Cat Oven to some point with Soul Guide Lanterns and stuff, but we can't stop the amount of value they get off of Trail of Crumbs. We definitely lose that fight, so we're really relying on like Brazen bouncing that and then countering it on the way back down, which is just not, we don't have time to do that really, you know, in all reality. It's pretty tough. So anyway, getting back to like what this deck does, if you guys didn't see the other video for U-White, basically provides card advantage and draw and go with Omen of the Sea, Chemisters, stuff like that, where we can leave mana open to do something end of turn, and then if our opponent doesn't do anything to counterspell, like with Neutralize or Veto, we slam Omen of the Sun, we flash out Brazen Borrower, start applying pressure, maybe make a 5/5 Shark, you know, etc. Like, we have a lot of options. We can even +1 Teferi and do something like Mythos end of turn on their ECD, or like Mythos, you know, one of their creatures, one of our creatures. We can Mythos our own Shark Typhoon end of turn. There's a lot of super powerful plays to be had with this list. Not only that, but we have lands where we can leave open mana for as well. Like if our opponent doesn't do anything and we don't use our counter spell, scry for 2, make a dude. And these guys really take over the game. They're pretty insane. I think we could probably lose like 1 plains for another island here potentially. And a lot of people ask why I'm using the triomes here for Jeskai. It's because they're islands and mountains. Not really mountains, but islands and plains, which check both of these lands, which is super important early game. So you don't have to worry about, like, you know, having Castle Vantress and then like 2 plains or something awkward. Normally you can just play the Castle Vantress, you know, and have the plains come into play untapped. More commonly it would be like 2 Vantress, 1 plains, and it's like then you have 2 tap lands. You might not be able to hold up Neutralize or something on 3. And having something like the Triomes are just great because it checks all of those. Also lets us be a little greedy with these 2 lands here, Blast Zone and Field of Ruin. This kind of hoses Sacrifice. It's our only answer to Trail of Crumbs, to Witch's Oven, stuff like that, main deck, aside from bouncing and going with it. Normally we can go over the top and just play Trawler or other types of lifelink, just gaining enough life to out-heal the cat between birth and everything else. But it's just generally something that we can lose to. So having something like this as an out is super nice. It also takes care of an opposing Teferi 3 if we're not allowed to deploy our own. If our opponent's keeping off of that from counter spells, so this is kind of nice. And the Fabled, of course, are to have blue and white sources accounted for, basically. And it shuffles the deck, which is a huge deal. Just being like, if you put your Dream Trawler on bottom and you need that guy back on top late game, being able to shuffle is nice. We have that in 2 forms, Fabled and Birth here. We'll shuffle as well. That's also a disadvantage though, like if we're scrying a bunch of lands to the bottom and then we have to get our next land, shuffling like, 4 lands into the middle of our deck to the top possibly doesn't feel great, because then at least when we scry, we know where they're at, but that's sort of a minor point. There's a push and pull to that, and you've got to pay attention always. Click on your deck, see what's on the bottom of it. You can always scroll back, see what's on bottom, and see what's up. So the advantage of this list is that we run counter spells and Brazen Borrowers. So if something resolves, we can sometimes bounce it, counter it. Like that's one of our answers to Teferi, aside from ECDs. And then we've got just a lot of counter spells main deck, like Tail's End, Vetoes, just really tech to beat Jeskai Yorion in the first game, so that's not as frustrating. We can see the wrong side of our deck. We can see Shatters and whatnot, but when we see Yorion on the opponent's side, we know that we don't want these. So if we have a really bad hand, we can mull for that. That's important, okay? Like that's going to be insanely good for, just knowledge. So that being said, like mulliganing, how do I keep for this deck? Basically like 2 to 3 lands. 2 is way more okay when you have Omen or Birth to kind of fix your lands. Shark Typhoon can be an okay cycle for 2 if you absolutely need to keep a hand. Like if you mold down to 6, you only got 2 lands and you have a Shark Typhoon plus like Omen of the Sun, like another turn 3 play, something like that. And you got a Triome and a Plains or something, maybe a Brazen. You can keep that hand and it's a little more okay with the Shark Typhoon, but you definitely want these ones. That's why we run 8 copies of these total. It's just so we can always see something. Always fix our hand for mana. We also run 35, which is a little higher than some U white lists, actually. I see a lot of people trying to get away with 33, 34. Personally, for me, I'm more comfortable with 35 as a control player. And someone that was running, Bant with 38, 39 lands. 35 is fine with me. You can run 1 less if you want to tech for another card main deck. Maybe like, I don't know. Maybe like 3rd Mythos. You could put in like anything really. Anything that you wanted to tech for. You could even run like a single Soul Guide Lantern main deck. Maybe you could run a single Dispute. I hate that. You can run 1 to 2 Disputes. It's fine. You could run a Narset. That would be pretty okay if you wanted to trim a land. But that being said, like there's some wiggle room for this, but I really like the Tail's End at 2. I don't mind the Veto at 3. You could probably trim that to 2 if you wanted to find room for another one in the sideboard. Basically what I'm saying is the list is pretty flexible as long as you don't change like the Shark Typhoons and the Elspeths and the Mythos, I would say. You could probably even cut the Trawler. Like he's kind of good, but it's mainly good because they can't claim or active trees in this, and you just eventually get there through aggro. But yeah, it's pretty much the deck. Mulliganing, just keep Birth plus 2 or 3 lands, keep Omen 2 or 3 lands, etc. Those are just the really important cards. Also, Neutralize is another one that's good to keep if you absolutely need to cycle a card for a land, like if you have 2 lands, etc. Anything that you can cycle for 2 and kind of get there with it, it's fine. The deck eventually wins by Shark Typhooning, by casting it manually sometimes, like not cycling it basically. So you get one of these set up, and we have so much action end of turn for this. We've got Chemisters, we've got Brazen triggers, we've got Omen of the Sun, we got anytime we counterspell, we get some Omen's Birth, like so many cheap cards that just pump out tokens to either block and or apply pressure in the following turns. And if we Shatter the Sky, we get to draw a card off of it all the time when we have Shark Typhoon, which is just nice. So we can find some gas to refill that back up. Oftentimes in my VODs, you'll see me setting up like 1 or 2 Shark Typhoons at a time sometimes. Like if you drop by the stream and such. So it's just a very, very good deck. You can even, my favorite play is probably Mythosing the Shark Typhoon here. It's just a blast. Because then you get to deploy a 6 mana CMC for 4, and that's just great value, and you can even do it end of turn with Teferi potentially, and set up for a really volatile turn, you know, when you get to untap with that stuff. So that's that. So good and bad matchups, what are we set up against? We are set up mostly against Cycling, Sakdos, Grillfires / aggro, and maybe mono green. Mono green's a little touchy because like our vetoes are a little out of place. Tails End's okay. Usually they have like Vivians and whatnot. Like they have like 1 or 2 champions, I think, or 3, and then 3 of the arc bows, I think, the 4 drops. So like overall we're pretty teched against that. We have 4 board wipes. I would say we need a 5th one to be really consistent against them, or even 6 with Realm Cloak Giant or Time Wipe in the sideboard. But that's like if like whatever you're struggling against, ask what it is, and if you care about that matchup more than what we're already teched against, make adjustments either to the main board or sideboard depending on when you're losing your games, you know. Reason I think we have a good game against Cycling is because we have 3 vetoes, and we've got neutralizes and stuff. Tails End can also stop a bunch of stuff. You can stop them from cycling, which is hilarious. Probably bad though, because then you're only like 1 for 1ing. But if you think that they are desperately looking for something, you can Tails End. I might sideboard that out. The sideboard guide will be on an article that I'm writing up for this list. It'll be on mtgazone.com. I'll have a link into the description below once that article's actually up. And that'll go over all the sideboard tech for this list, pretty much. So, and I might change the sideboard around a little bit, depending on if we end up doing the Jund adjustments, because I've been running into that a bit on the ladder. But I'll keep you guys posted on that. The article will be updated with that in mind, with the tech options and everything. Same thing in this video. So yeah. Basically the idea behind this is we can gain more life than like Sakdos can really do game 1 with omens and stuff, and being able to block their critters with birth, etc. Just being able to reset them and go over the top with Trawler eventually. And then we've got like really decent sideboards against them with Soul Guides and Caskets. It's just not terrible. I would like to have like the 1 of Heliod's in the sideboard, like I said before, especially with Jund coming back up, but we'll make adjustments. Even matchups, I would say Jeskai Yorion, Tamir Reclamation, and Winota of any flavor for the most part. So the reason why I think we're even against Jeskai Yorion is because we probably take game 1 with all of our counter spells. They simply can't match us for that. Now, if they do slip through and they get a Luca down and they have a token already, and you don't have Brazen to bounce that thing, because you can bounce the token in response to the -2 and whiff the effect, and then you can maybe make a comeback by like exiling the Luca with an ECD or whatever, like basically whatever you can do, you can kind of get there. Comedy option is Mythosing the Luca, so we can minus on 1 of our own tokens to guarantee Dream Trawler. But like if we leave them with the Luca, it's probably not going to work out for us. It's funny, but that's what it is. It's the comedy option, right? But yeah, game 1, like we can kind of pressure them with omens too, planeswalker wise. Brazens are really good against them, and we've got neutralize, veto, and Tails End, which just shuts down all of their important cards for the most part. We might struggle late game if we're holding on to vetoes and they go agent or Tails End. We can stop the agent trigger with Tails End, but then we have to figure out a way to answer agent. Otherwise, they just blink it with Yorion, etc. Also, Tails End is hilarious versus Yorion, because you can just do this on the them coming back into play. You can just keep them all in exile by Tails Ending that. You can also Tails End the Yorion itself before they get the triggers if you think they might have a response later on, but that's up to you. It's just a good option. So Tamir Reclamation's a little weird because we do have vetoes and stuff, and you know, Tails End can stop like a Reclamation untap step, which is pretty interesting. It's not great though. You'd rather just counter it with Neutralize or something, or bounce it with Brazen before the end of turn, but it is an option. And it does shut down Uro, I believe, because he's legendary, so you can counter that, which is nice. Usually on the escape, not on the initial deployment where they're trying to ramp with him. But you could use it that way if you really wanted to, if you want to use it like an Aether Gust, basically. It's not terrible. Doesn't do exactly the same thing, but you know. And then, like, you know, just a lot of counter spells and Teferi means that we're, you know, at least even with Tamir Reclamation. We can Mythos the Reclamation, which is funny. That way we can tap out and still keep our mana open during their turn to counterspell. Be super good with like Shark Typhoon and stuff too, but that's like if you get it resolved. Winota, I'd say that our sideboard is pretty good against them. You have Caskets for like war bosses. You've got Hushbringer for agents. They don't usually have an answer to Hushbringer for the most part. Like sometimes they do damage with stuff like Bone Crusher or whatever else. Not really sure what they're running this nowadays. Like I don't really fight against them too often. If they're on the Jeskai variation, we can use Disputes to mess with their counter spells. So like overall, like if you resolve a Hushbringer against that deck, it's pretty GG. Also, Hushbringer is good against Yorion, which is what we're tacked for there. Most of their cards just don't do anything. Like they can Jeskai, they can develop like Luca and do the -2, but all of their creatures just don't have enter the battlefield effects. That being said, they could have like, you know, Dream Trawler, which is kind of an issue. We have to beat that out with like a Shark Typhoon, because we're probably going to be sideboarding out some of our Shatters, especially if we're bringing in Hushbringer. So that's a little risky, but we will also have Disputes, etc. So if we can kind of fight off the Teferi, we can just hold a counter spell for the Trawler eventually. We just can't deal with them cheating it into play, I guess, from that perspective. So it's just a little bit of a min-max there, trying to figure out how to play around what your opponent wants to do. Bant Ramp and Jund Sacrifice, I would say, are our two worst matchups at the moment. The reason why Bant is bad is because they ramp and they start doing more than one thing a turn, and we kind of struggle against that with our 1-for-1 strat with like counter spells and whatnot. Like aside from Shatter, we don't really 2-for-1 people too often. You know, so that's kind of our downfall, is someone ramping and going over the top. And then also having Agent and Yorion and stuff to mess with. They're kind of worse than Jeskai Yorion, like Jeskai Luca in that sense. So, and then Jund Sacrifice is bad because we have like hardly any answer to Trail of Crumbs. So that matchup's super easy if you want to change out like 2 cards in the sideboard with 2 Heliod's or something. Super easy, just like trim on the Dispute, cut the Narsets or whatever, and then boom, 2 or 3 Heliod's, etc. And you're good against that matchup. Also, this could be switched out for Decree, depending on like what you're struggling against. Like this can be really good against Uro, for example. Not always do you want to bring this in against Uro, but if they're also running Shark Typhoons, you can take care of a Typhoon and then use Yorion to blink and answer another Typhoon or something. Like it's pretty interesting compared to Decree, which is pretty one-dimensional, where you just bring it against Sakdos, Knights, Sacrifice, Jund Sacrifice, etc. So those are just options for you. Sorry about that. So yeah, not too terrible anyway. So yeah, I'll have the updated sideboard guide specifically. We've already kind of briefly gone over what these are for the most part. This is anything that runs blue for the most part. Tamir Elementals, etc. I think Tamir, we're slightly favored against them, by the way. That's one of the ones that I didn't mention in the good bad matchups, just because we have like Tail's End. Well, that one's not actually that great. It's good against Yorion. But we have Hushbringer sideboard, basically, is why we're good against that. All of their elementals require them to have enter the battlefield effects, like Risen Reef, Cavalier, Omnath. The only thing that Omnath can do is just draw a bunch of cards for them. Sometimes they just mill out, though, because their agents don't do anything. Genesis does nothing because they don't get ETB effects. Like, it just shuts their whole deck down, and they usually don't have an answer for this because they sideboard out, you know, Fire Prophecies or whatever creature removal they have. They usually rely on something like Omnath to get there, and Omnath won't kill this. So It's pretty good. So yeah, I would say that's pretty decent in regards to coverage of like, you know, the basics for the deck. Like I said, the sideboard guide specifically, we'll be going over that in the article. So let's just jump into some gameplay, and you guys can kind of see how we did in a. I think this will be like the last game of best of 3. But we'll have the full coverage later this week. So if you guys are interested in how that game sort of unfolded to that best of 3 match, then you know, just watch out for some of the new videos coming out on the channel. So yeah, let's get into it. All right, so this is the gameplay for the best 2 out of 3 for the White Yorion control versus Jeskai Fires. Now, this was an unranked match. This is me making any small adjustments to the sideboard. We just had a crazy game too. I'm also gonna, because this is part of the deck guide, right? So what I'm gonna do for this whole thing, this whole process, is I will cover this whole best of 3 match because it was so good. All 3 games were very close, and I feel like it's some of the best Magic that I've played in a really long time. So it was just really, really enjoyable for me. Like here, I'm just really making sure that my sideboard's correct. Sometimes I check with chat too to see if they think that there is any sideboard adjustments. So I try to respond to chat, catch up, kind of take a minute to breathe during the sideboard process. Feel like you should really do that if you don't already. It's such a good tool. So you can like de-stress, untilt whatever's bothering you. Take a moment and realize that it's just a game of Magic. And while we want to win all of our games of Magic in a perfect world, it's not going to happen. At best, you're going to have like a 55-60% win rate or so over the course of your entire life, probably. So we definitely snap keep this hand. We've got a counter spell, we've got a shatter, which is very important in this matchup, and we've got the Scry land, we've got a Triome. Our lands are pretty good. So here it's pretty close. You can probably write an essay on which one you should start with, whether you should start with a Cry to look for a mystical dispute, or whether you should start with a Triome because you know you're going to play it anyway, and you might need the Scry later on in the game. There's also the argument that the Triome here could be cycled late game if we end up drawing 3 lands in a row. You know, it could give us a turn 3 play while keeping mana open for a counter. But here I just go Temple of Enlightenment. And we have no protection from Teferi here. But we are going to keep the land. And then we're just going to be chilling out, seeing what to do. So we set a stop here just to mess with our opponent to make them think that we might have a dispute or an opt or something. But, you know, it's just a bluff. So we remove the stop. They +1 here, I believe. And yeah, we just keep moving. So we've got Castle Vantress here. We can play either or, it doesn't really matter. Castle Vantress can kind of stress them out if we play that early. Because then they know that we have some late game. They can't just win the game from being very passive and like playing fires and doing this stuff with Castle Vantress, you know? Like their Castle Vantress will not be ours late game for the most part. We just come out on top. Usually they're all the time as the control deck. They're like the aggro list, so they have to win, you know? So here we go. We just +1 here. Just keeping Teferi super thick. Now that does play into ECD, and we have no target for that. So there might have been a play to -3 there. It would have moved it to 2, so even if they Shark Typhoon for 1, like looking back at it now, I probably should have minus Teferi. Even though it's minor, it is still a mistake, I feel. If we're like playing around Shark Typhoon or something, like it's fine to just deal with it, you know? I think we just eat it there. So we Chemisters here just to draw, trying to get closer to ECD territory or Mythos to copy their ECD if they happen to deploy one to deal with Teferi. Other than that, we're in pretty good shape. We're just chilling out, doing our thing. So they crack this, and I think that they do, unfortunately, play the ECD here, if my memory serves me correctly. They just slam it right on the table. Boom. And I think they even pick it up at this point, but I'm not sure. I think they might leave it for a turn. So they do leave it, which is pretty weak to our ECD if we had one. But if we had an ECD, we might have... Well, I guess we couldn't play it last turn because we didn't have the mana. But so now we have to make a decision on whether to Shark Typhoon here. There's a Shatter the Sky that's sort of blocked by the overlay there. So there's that. But it's fine. It's pretty visible still. It's pretty minor. Our Neutralize is pretty dead. I think we hold on to that until we actually cast it as a counter spell, though, which is pretty fun. So we just look for white here, I believe. That way we can get Ardent Veil online later on. That way we have the double white plus Ardent Veil. It's just easier to keep the mana open that way with more white sources. So, and here we can either draw with the Fairy, we can threaten with a Shark Typhoon, etc. Like we get quite a few plays here. So we discard a Hollowed Fountain, drawing more. We do find the ECD. Unfortunately, that's going to be too expensive to cast, and I talk about this. I was talking about this while I was streaming too. The ECD is going to be 7, and they're counting too to see how much ECD is going to cost, and like if they can, you know, if they're allowed to kind of tap out for other stuff now, seeing if they can go in. Very good. It's like the same assessment of like sizing up your opponent's you know, chip stack and poker. You get to see what they're working with, you know. And we've got Ikoria coming down here, so draw 2, pretty strong play overall. And I think here, since they don't have a target for ECD, they want to take the removal for later, which is very stressful for us. We don't like that at all. Because like, what else is the ECD gonna do, you know? And that's a really good minus for the ECD in case we do have our own ECD anyway, even if we can't cast it. Plus, if we have Mythos, we can copy the ECD, remove Teferi, remove Ikoria, one of those two. So just really heads up play by the opponent here, bouncing that. I didn't realize how good of a play that was until I started to reanalyze it a bit. They have Cavalier of Flame, which is pretty tough. I think what I opt into here is I count my mana, and I realize that I can't kill Cavalier of Flame, which is kind of a difficult issue. So we discard, draw a bunch. So they have a grip full of cards, which is just scary because their board state's good too, you know? It's very hard to come back from this situation, honestly. But I mean, we even it out a little bit here. We get to draw a card, block Ikoria, and we actually kill him, which is nice. So we double check our mana, just making sure that we're not punting here somehow. Like making sure that we can't make a 5 shark or something. So, and then we take the damage, go down to 13. Teferi, I almost instantly cast this. I'm trying to see if this is worth it. Because I'm not going to be able to counter their Cavalier, even if I minus it. So it's like right now it's almost worth it to... I think what I'm planning is to... This takes me a while. And I don't even know what the right decision is here. You could definitely write like 3 essays on this turn. We have so many options. I think I go Elspeth Conquers Death, and then I hold up the Omen to get more cards and such, rotating in and whatnot. And exiling the Cavalier here is actually pretty key, because then they can't bring it back with ECD. Like, Ikoria is still a good target. And like I'm trying to decide here whether it's worth it or whether I want to try to wait until they ECD. I just ECD anyway because it forces their ECD, which is really nice. So we get to exile the Cavalier, and then we play Omen since we can't bluff a counter spell since Teferi says no to that. And the way that I look at it here, I think, is that if I'm playing around the ECD, oof, that Shatter to the bottom, man. I wish I had kept that on top. Now that I look back at it, man, against Fires, I think I should keep that on top every time. I think that's how you win these games. So instead of deploying creatures here, they have to deploy Elspeth Conquers Death to get that off the table. Otherwise, they lose the battle of value here. And I think they even -3 this again to make it so that we can't ECD their ECD, which is pretty tough, but you know, we have to fight through it anyway. We can't control what our opponent's doing if they have Teferi especially. Only kind of reactions we get are like, you know, Sorry. The yawn. Okay, we're done with it. I'm recording this after a really long stream, so I apologize for the low energy levels in the video. I hope I'm doing an okay enough job for it though. So now they get that exiled. We can still pay for a dispute at this point, which is nice. And now when they go to cast Elspeth Conquers Death, we can try to dispute it, or not dispute, but neutralize it. So we just take that down to 9, very close to death here. Like, had they had a Cavalier here, it would have been really brutal. Like Cavalier plus a dispute background or something. Not background, but back up. There we go. Would have been tough. I don't think they could give it haste if we had the dispute, though. No, they could. They could. Absolutely could. So we have to counter this. There's no choice. We would like to counter something else if we were allowed, but we just have to counter that card because that card just makes it so their next card resolves anyway. So we just lose if we let that go through. So now they are tapped out. We're asking for something one time off the top. I can see my old webcam. I don't know what I'm asking for. Probably like another ECD or a Mythos to kind of secure this. Neutralize is not bad though. I think that I opt into bouncing the Elspeths with Teferi, like with a -3, drawing a card, and then holding up the neutralize to protect against the ECD. And this is where the turning point sort of happens. And this is a super like seesaw match. Like it keeps going back and forth between me and the opponent here. It's really, really close, man. So we hit the lad drop. Super significant here. I checked to see how much mana I have. Like I always usually just highlight my card to check how much mana. And they're also counting my mana as well. Seeing how much they can pay for, like for dispute and such. I feel like it's a really bad idea to actually click on your lands. That'll probably be a tips and tricks video eventually, but don't do that. Don't highlight lands. It lets your opponent know what you're thinking, that you're counting up to play around a dispute. And you can play into that if like your opponent knows about it or whatever. And then I think they try to cast Bone Crusher here, and I just cash out on this dispute since it's going to be useless for the rest of the game. Yep, exactly what happens. So Boop gets disputed. We know that they don't have a dispute. Well, actually we don't because of Teferi. We can't read the engine there. So we're definitely coming out of it. I don't know why the opponent plays that land. They must have a lot of lands in hand, but I would almost hold the cycle lands at this point, especially since they just cashed out on a dispute. So we crack Fabled. I'm just getting rid of one of their Vantress right now, I think. I might be thinking about it. I actually tap my lands so that I can actually Field of Ruin end of turn on top of casting Yorion here, which I think is pretty okay. Looking back at it, like scrying with the Omen also would have been fine. We're down to 9 minutes on the timer. We've been playing kind of slow, but I feel like that's how you win these really long matchups. So here we go. That's going to come up. So we're just waiting to see what our opponent does. We have Omen to chump if we need to. We've got Shatter if they overcommit to the table. We're in like a pretty okay spot. We have no responses to this. We could like try to do something, but it doesn't really amount to much. Like we don't actually draw any cards on our turn. The most we could do is like scry and look for an answer. But we're more concerned about the creatures that he's playing after fires at this point. So here's Kenny. So we actually have a really, yeah, I think what happens is they give this haste, which is, you know, obvious, like duh, before combat, you give it haste, of course. Then they swing it to Teferi, I believe. They might swing at HP, but I doubt it. I think they just go, they go to Teferi. And then we crack Field of Ruin, leaving open, like, you know, whatever mana, it doesn't really matter at this point. So we pop the Vantress. They float the mana, and I think they draw a card with it. It takes them a minute, so it'll be just a second. Because they want to keep exact mana up for something, I don't know what. Like maybe in case they draw into something, they can like maybe dispute or do something weird. Like it just doesn't matter. Like their mana just doesn't matter here. I don't think this much. I think maybe they have like Bone Crusher or something, or they want to represent Veto, even though Yeah, I guess representing veto there is pretty fair. Because if they actually get to kill the Teferi, if I don't block, then they could use a card. So I'm just casting Omen of the Sun. Flashing it in there. And then I think I triple block here. Just in case they have a boost or something weird, like, I don't know. Like, I just do it to do it, I think, honestly. Might as well, right? Might as well get some of those soldiers in on the action. We draw into Birth, which isn't great. I think I cast this anyway. And then I try to figure out if it's worth bouncing the Omen or bouncing the other Omen. Like the Sun versus the Sea here. And I think I play the Birth first, I believe. I go white mana, blue mana, Birth. And I'm trying to think if scrying's worth it here. Yeah, I remember talking about this. This is a really close turn. Like on what we wanted to do with our mana exactly. So thin the deck, shuffle before we do Omen, basically. And Omen gets us the most amount of cards. Sun gets us the most amount of life. But I think for me, it's more important to... it's like I played Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo for that one. So we draw into a Dispute, which is actually not like the worst card, the absolute worst. It's pretty bad, like don't get me wrong, but you know, we can work with it. We bottom the Sun, which I almost regret now because it's a non-land. And then we're just ECDing so that way our Dispute can actually be online at some point or another. And we're still holding it up full mana, I think. No, it's just 1 mana. We don't have the 3 mana Dispute. So if they cast ECD or something, they just get it. And we don't even get like a response. So that's kind of tough. So here comes Kenny. I think they actually tap out for like a Sphinx of Foresight. They try to cast it. And then we just Dispute this thing, which is awesome. Feels so good in this moment to do this. Just the fact that we had the Dispute. This is like another turning point. Like I said, like they were swinging with Kenny. They had a really good turn, really powerful, but we're slowly peeling it back as players right now. Like, so now this gets haste and trample. So we don't even bother to block this. They just go face actually. So I think we do block it. If it was at Teferi, no blocks. No blocks at all. Jeez, I've got to stop. I need some water for some energy. Chemisters is actually not terrible. Gives us lots of draws for the course of the game, which is nice. So I think I can shatter at instant speed, so I just do that for the most part. I'm pretty sure this is the turn that's really, really, really close. Like, I think they play Cavalier of Flames, and we decide to let it resolve before Kenrith blows up. Yeah, this is a really dicey turn. I remember this being really stressful for me. So they pitched like 2 cards, I think. No, they pitch all 3 Disputes, now I remember. Yeah. That's pretty crazy. They found them all, dude. So this doesn't really matter. Like, it does and it doesn't. Like, their attack power doesn't matter, right? Because they're going to draw a card anyway. And the damage off of Cavalier isn't based off of its health. It's based off of the amount of lands in the graveyard for them. So they're going to swing both at face, of course, because this is lethal if we don't do anything about it. So I block anyway, just in case they want to pump. I'm trying to bait them into a pump. And then we just shatter, which helps us a lot, honestly. And we take 7 and we go down to 8. So this is like... This is close, man. This is pretty much the turn. They shock that in. This is the moment. Just one time off the top. Whoosh. Dovin's Veto. I need it real bad. Come on, one time. Whoosh. One time, Heart of the Cards. Need it. Still work. Still works. And like chat spams emotes. So then we just develop Yorion here, just kind of chilling out. That was a super crazy clip though. Like super good luck. And we just lock it down from this point. I think they scoop pretty The Yorion heart, the waifu heart emote, the Streamlabs thing, just like right there. And I think they try to like I think they try to Elspeth Conquers Death, to try to get this going. And we draw Mythos too, which is just a really good follow up. There's a point where I almost copy the Mythos here. I almost copy the ECD that they play, but I just end up Tails ending it anyway. Such a good game of Magic though. This whole match, this best of 3, was some of my favorite Magic in such a long time, man. It was so good. So nice, dude. And yep, they just Elspeth. We can't Tails End that. But we can Tails End the trigger for it, which is what we do. And they can't respond even if they had like a dispute or they had something. They can't do it because of Teferi 3-head. So we just instantly Tails End that. And then they're thinking about scrying, but like they pretty much know that the game is over, that they can't really break through this wall of creatures and Narset being able to draw, etc. So we just kind of close it out there real strong. So yeah, if you guys enjoy the deck guides, all of this good stuff, the gameplay, like the best of 3, because I'm going to use this probably for 2 videos. One for the best of 3 matchup overall for like the whole gameplay. So this thing, all of this gameplay will be on a separate video, like the whole best of 3 match. I'm going to capture that and go back and cover it. And then this is also going to be part of the deck guide video that you're watching right now too, potentially. Or if you're watching the other video, yeah, you guys get it. But anyway, appreciate you guys chilling out and being awesome, watching the video. Hope you guys enjoyed the content. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below, or simply stop by my stream. We can chat. You can ask about like, you know, plays, changes with the list, etc. And I do a deck guide like this at least twice a week usually. Usually it's like 2 to 3 times. So if you guys are interested in those, they're usually on Aether Hub, they're on YouTube. There's even a playlist on my main page that just shows all of the deck guides that we've done so far for Standard. So appreciate you guys, and I will see you next time.